Hi, I'm Paul Chartier, and you're watching Heart of Gold. Thanks for tuning in. Our special guest this month is the Markey Cancer Center. Ladies first, Laura Babbage.
Yes.
Dr. Keen Babbage, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and Dr. Mark Randall. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If you don't know Keen Babbage and his story, it is a compelling story. And I'm going to be your audience. Tell the people what happened.
In the summer of 2010, I noticed something was not right under my eye, my left eye. Seemed to be some swelling, but no measurement, no tests showed anything abnormal. And then I was on the phone one day in August of that summer with my sister-in-law. She said, "You sound awful." And I did. This was getting worse, whatever it was. I'm a teacher. August is a demanding month, so I'm working hard. And I go to a physician, and we assumed it was a sinusitis problem. Reasonable conclusion. We tried some medication. It didn't help any. Went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and they tried some more aggressive medication, and it didn't respond at all. Went back to those people, and they said, "Let's do a CT scan." Something showed up. And then they said, "Let's do an MRI." And then we did a biopsy because there was a tumor in the sinus areas, which we then found out was sinus cancer, very rare type of cancer. All of this was happening at the same time. My dear mother's health was declining. My mother, Judy Babbage, was a saint, one of the most wonderful people who ever lived. And her health was declining. I was diagnosed with sinus cancer on October 12th of 2010, and Mom's health was getting worse, and she knew that she was declining. And she asked us about her condition, and then she said to us some very inspiring words. "If I die, do not grieve. Rejoice that I lived a good life." That inspired me then and still does. On the 12th of October in 2010, some of Dr. Randall's colleagues explained to me that I had sinus cancer. My brother Bob and sister-in-law Laura were with me when we found out about that. And we spent the rest of the day at UK. And the Markey Cancer Center and the UK healthcare facilities, wonderful people, great facilities. And I was so impressed that they just changed their schedule and accommodated what I needed. They said, "Keen, we knew you'd want to start treatment rapidly, so we'll start in 2 days with chemotherapy," which meant I had 1 day to get everything organized at school, not knowing how long I wouldn't be there. I met with the students the next day, and truly with tears in my eyes explained to them I have cancer and I'm going to be gone till February, perhaps. I always tell my students, Paul, to read more, keep reading. The advice I've given to them through the years, read more, keep reading. And they responded in cards and visits and said to me, "Dr. Babbage, fight more, keep fighting." One of the lessons you learn when you are diagnosed with cancer is that you are now in a war. It's not a battle, it's not temporary, it is a war. Cancer is a wicked disease, it's evil, it's cruel, it's vicious, and it fights with everything it has. It acts in every way it can to kill you, and you have to fight back in a way you've never known you had to fight before. But with the great help from the people at UK Markey Cancer Center, from terrific help from family, my brother and sister-in-law, their 3 children, even the family dog was encouraging and just could tell, something's wrong with Keen, I better keep a close eye on him. And we started the treatment on the 14th of October, 3 days in a row of chemotherapy. On the 3rd day that I had chemotherapy that morning, I went to visit my mother, and we knew she had very little time left. And she died that day. And we thought, Mom lived long enough to see me through the first round of chemotherapy. And then she went to live in heaven. From then on, it was chemotherapy every few weeks. We started radiation treatment on the 25th of October. And I was told, radiation treatment accumulates. I felt all right when we went to radiation treatment. I thought, I'm going to be as optimistic and hopeful as possible. These people work hard. They deserve to be encouraged. And I could do that for 11 days. And on the 12th day, the radiation treatments just took their toll.
And we have a picture of you in the medieval costume.
Yes, sir.
Ready to go in.
And that's part of what you have to wear so you are motionless when you're getting the radiation treatment. The people who provided the radiation treatment, they're experts, they're encouraging, they're patient-friendly, they answer your questions, and there were 35 doses of radiation, which had to be done to destroy this tumor in the sinus areas along with the chemotherapy. And thanks be to God, it worked. A few months later, the tumor wasn't there anymore. There were some side effects. And I had to be hospitalized at one point for 10 days. Couldn't swallow anything. The side effects included that impact. But the people at the Markey Cancer Center found solutions. So I could go back home, we could start the treatments again, and we could look forward to better days.
Laura, you've got the nuclear family. Great family, couple kids. You've got the crazy brother-in-law. You as a chaplain, how did you fit in and support this craziness that was going on?
Oh, and it really was craziness. It was one of those times when it's all hands on deck. You know, all three of our children were involved in one way or another. Certainly, you know, Bob and I kind of hit the pause button. And
Sure.
you know, when you hear something like cancer, it's overwhelming. And then of course with their mother dying so right in the center of it all, it just added another sorrow, really another thing that we had to grieve. And so to be surrounded by family and friends was a gift. My background is in healthcare. I'm a nurse and a chaplain now, and that really was a help in the process. At least I had seen some of what was going on before. I knew the medical terms, but really one of the greatest things that we had was Dr. Randall. I had met Mark on a flight from Lexington to Charlotte maybe a year or two before I ever knew that I would need to call on him for help, and to have an expert who could really help walk with you through this, who's also a friend, was invaluable. So our family came together. Everybody did what they needed to do. One of the real gifts of this process is the patient. I mean, Keen is just delightful in every way. He kept his sense of humor. I remember one time, and I've told this story before, but he was sitting in a chair in our home. He had moved in with us for a period of time, and I asked him if he was cold, and he said, no, I'm not. But of course, I thought he looked cold, so I got a blanket anyway. And then I went over and I felt his head, and I said, oh my gosh, Keen, you're actually hot. And he said, well, thank you very much. So, you know, and he felt awful. But yet in the midst of so many things, he kept his sense of humor. And his students were amazing. We would have study sessions at the house when he couldn't teach. And the students would come over. And just as he said earlier, the students were so encouraging. And whenever he had that to look forward to, a group coming over, and you know, one of them would play the piano, and others would tell stories. And you know, to have community surrounding you at a time when you are very, very sick is invaluable.
And there is a spiritual component here as well.
Absolutely. Our experience was that you fight cancer with faith, family, and friends. And you pray more, keep praying. We would go to the chemotherapy center at the Markey Cancer Center, and it would take 4, 5, 6 hours. And we would call everybody we could think of, connected with any church in Lexington or beyond. Keen's very sick, please pray for him. The chemotherapy did not work differently because we were praying, but I think as a patient I worked differently because I knew people were praying for me and were encouraging me, and that true conviction that your faith is going to be with you no matter what happens to your body. Your soul is intact, and you are going to keep your attitude that says, we will do everything we can to get through this. And you don't know the outcome, but you know how you're going to fight this war. We learned the lesson that alone is so limited. You cannot fight cancer by yourself. You need the experts at the Markey Cancer Center. You need your family. And they were willing to change their schedule completely and take care of me. You need friends, and students were so helpful because I couldn't go to school, but school could come to me.
Is that amazing?
Yes, sir.
We've got the entire half hour for the taping. We're going to stop halfway through. We've got 4 minutes to go, but I want to bring you in to talk about your involvement in the Babbage family. And then we'll talk about Markey Cancer Center in the second half.
Okay, if I could, Paul, I'd like to do just a little bit of public education. Keen mentioned cancer and how it's a a pretty difficult enemy. And in many cases that's true, and it certainly was true in Keen's case. Cancer isn't one disease. Cancer is hundreds of different diseases. It depends on where it starts and the kinds of cells that it is made up of, how close or far apart those cells are from normal, and that sort of thing. So some cancers we cure every day. Lots of cancers we cure every day. Cancer is not an incurable disease. So that's the public education piece. But getting back to Keen had a very aggressive cancer. He had an undifferentiated cancer of the sinus. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's bad because it's a very aggressive cancer, and absolutely he had to fight, and we had to fight with everything we had. The interesting thing about the cancer that Keen has is it is, as aggressive as it is also responsive to treatment, and sometimes that's what we see. So Keen had a cancer that was very aggressive, very undifferentiated, but one that was responsive to chemotherapy and responsive to radiation. And lots of cells get killed by those modalities, and particularly when we combine them. So that's, I'll just leave it at that. As Laura mentioned, she and I had met each other on an airplane a couple of years before this happened, and I'm not one to talk to who I sit beside. I usually read or work a crossword, and I talked to Laura all the way to the Charlotte airport, and we could have talked a lot longer, and we exchanged phone numbers and said we need to get together or something, and struck up a friendship. So when this happened, I was not Keen's primary physician. I made my career in gynecologic cancers. That's what I've done the most of. I'm not a head and neck cancer doctor. But when Keen was diagnosed, I was able to help them sort of facilitate their process in the system. But more than that, I think, as Laura said, I was a friend. And just someone that they could call, and I could go see him in the chemotherapy suite or whatever, and he could always call me. So,
how fabulous. And this is the power of Lexington, that you would reconnect when you got back. And you'd see each other and have that friendly background and foundation, and you never know what would happen as a result. And to have you, the humanity side of you, how many people would say, not my thing, that's not my expertise. And for you to be there for the family and offer advice, counsel, listen, had to be fantastic. And to be on this team, and it does take a team. Nothing can be done alone.
It was easy to do because of Keen and his family.
Keen's going to talk about his signed book, and I hope to God you got a signed copy. We are going to take a break. We'll be right back to talk more about Markey Cancer Center and this gentleman next to me. We'll be right back.